Snow didn't fall, it settled, slow and sacred, over the broken fence line, like the land itself was holding its breath. There she was, a woman in a velvet red prairie dress torn at the hem, tied to a splintered wooden post like a warning no one wanted to read. The wind pulled strands of her damp blonde hair across her face, catching in the cracked corners of her lips. Her skin, pale and trembling, bore the frost's kiss. Blood crusted where the rope bit into her wrists. Beside her, two small girls stood bound to shorter fence posts, heads bowed, twin silhouettes in dusty rose pioneer dresses, white tights dirted, brown boots soaked through. They didn't cry. That had dried up miles ago. The sound of hooves broke through the hush, slow, deliberate. The rider emerged from the white mist like a ghost made of grit and leather. He sat tall in the saddle, wrapped in a buffalo coat patched at the elbows, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his eyes. He didn't ask who tied them, didn't demand names, just studied the woman, as though he recognized something that had no word. Then he dismounted without a sound. Snow crunched under his boots as he approached. The girls looked up, not in hope, not in fear, just to see if this man might finish what the others had started. But he knelt beside them like a man unlearning violence. He worked the knots with leather-worn hands, lifting one girl, then the other, settling them gently in his arms as if they were no heavier than snowfall. The woman watched, too numb to plead, her breath hitching once in her throat when he turned to her. He didn't speak, just raised his knife, not fast, not threatening, and sawed the ropes with a precision that said he'd done this before. When her arms dropped limp to her sides, she nearly collapsed. He caught her elbow, without looking into her eyes, guided her to his horse, and hoisted the girls up first. She climbed into the saddle without protest. Her legs shook, and she gripped the saddle horn as though it were the last thing holding her to the earth. The ride back to town passed in silence. She didn't ask where he was taking them. She just watched the snow blur the world into a white silence, the only warmth pressing against her back, where the girls huddled. One of them began to hum, quiet and tuneless, just to prove she could. By the time they reached the outskirts of town, the silence had shifted. Not between them it remained sacred, but the silence of the town was a different beast. Doors opened just wide enough for eyes to peek. Curtains twitched. The general store's porch creaked with judgment. Murmurs rose. That her? Came crawling back, did she? Rancher's gone soft. No one said it to her face, but the air reeked of disdain. The girls curled tighter against the rancher's back. She met no one's eyes, though her shoulders pulled back just enough to show she still had bones in her. A boy threw a stone near the horse's hooves. The horse shifted but didn't startle. The rancher kept riding, slower now, like daring the town to make it harder. The preacher turned his back as they passed the chapel. The sheriff looked away. The rancher never broke stride. He didn't stop at the inn, nor the doctor's house. Instead, he led them out past the last row of cabins toward the hills, where fences grew crooked and the land wasn't polished for show. His cabin stood alone, smoke curling from a chimney, half buried in snowdrift. He helped the girls down first. They stood uncertain, too tired to move until he nudged them toward the door. Then he turned to her. She couldn't meet his eyes. Not yet. Inside, the heat was faint but real, embers glowing in a belly stove, casting flickers across rough-hewn walls. He brought out a wool blanket, wrapped it around the twins, and nudged them onto a bedroll near the fire. Then he ladled stew from a blackened pot and handed a bowl to her. She stared at it, fists clenched, throat dry. I didn't ask for charity, she said, voice rasped raw. He shrugged once. Didn't offer it. Still she ate. Slowly, each spoonful a surrender. He moved about the room without noise, fixing a crooked chair leg, patching a hole in the wall with old feed sacks. When he passed her, he didn't touch her. He didn't ask her past. He didn't comment on her silence. But when she coughed, he placed a tin cup of boiled water with a lemon slice beside her knee. Later, when the girls were asleep and the fire burned low, she stood and walked outside barefoot. The snow bit into her soles, sharp and real. She wanted to feel pain, not out of penance, but just to remember she still could. Her dress flared around her calves like a forgotten flag. He found her standing there. I ain't running, she said without turning. I know, he replied. She expected him to drag her back in. Instead, he draped a coat around her shoulders and stepped back, letting her stay in the cold just a little longer. The stars above cracked through the clouds. She closed her eyes. "I don't even know your name," she murmured. He hesitated, and then said quietly, "Call me Wade." She turned to face him, the snow falling gentle between them, the night holding its breath. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel tied to anything. The morning came in slow shades of ash and amber. Smoke curled soft from the chimney, weaving into the sky like it was carrying last night's silence into the heavens. Inside, the widow stood barefoot on creaking floorboards, watching the rancher move through the cabin like a man who'd grown used to quiet. He was already dressed, already moving, feeding the stove, pouring coffee, mending a loose hinge on the door, all without a word. The twins sat at the table, cheeks pink with warmth, biting into rough biscuits with jam too thin to be sweet. They glanced toward their mother now and then, measuring her like children do when the world has shifted and they need to know where safety ends. She offered a smile, weak but honest. It was enough for today. The rancher placed a plate in front of her, biscuits and a strip of salted pork. She stared down at it like it might speak. Her fingers curled in her lap, ashamed of the way her stomach growled. "You feedin' me again?" she asked, voice low. Wade didn't look up. "You ain't starvin' under my roof." He walked past her, leaving the scent of soap and cedar in his wake. She took a bite. Outside, the snow had turned to hard crust. Wagon wheels cracked through the morning frost as townsfolk began to move about, boots thudding against frozen mud. Wade hitching his horse was the only sound on the edge of his land. "Town," he said simply. She hesitated. "You want us to stay here?" "You're coming." She didn't ask why. She didn't ask if he was afraid of leaving them behind. She just wrapped the girls in shawls and tucked their hair beneath wool hats, then climbed into the saddle behind him. The ride into town was colder than she remembered, not for lack of sun, but because the town hadn't thawed. Every set of eyes that met hers froze her in place. Shopkeepers stalled their greetings. A woman on a porch stared until the widow looked down. Even the preacher passed them on the street without a nod. The general store door creaked as Wade pushed it open. Inside, warmth and judgment both waited. "She's still here," the shopkeep said under his breath, eyes never leaving her. Wade placed his list on the counter, slow and deliberate. "She is. You know what folks say." Wade looked at the man, just looked, and something in his silence made the shopkeeper's hands tremble as he counted out flour. Behind them, the twins clutched their mother's skirt. She stood straighter, though the weight in her spine never eased. As they stepped out onto the street again, a boy threw a clump of snow at her back. It exploded, wet and sudden. She stiffened. Wade turned. The boy vanished around a corner. Her hands curled into fists. He said nothing. They left town without another word. That night, she sat on the front step while the girls played near the fire inside. She watched the trees in the distance, bare, reaching things that had survived more winters than she ever would. Her dress had been mended at the hem by his hand. His stitching wasn't pretty, but it held. "You gonna keep talking beatings for me?" she asked as he joined her with 2 tin cups of coffee. "You planning on making enemies?" "Don't need to. I am one." He handed her the cup. "Not here." For a long while, they just sat, steam curling between them. She listened to the whistle of wind over the roof, to the laughter of her daughters, to the heart she hadn't realized had kept beating all this time. But peace, she knew, wasn't a gift the world gave freely. The next afternoon, the drifter rode in. She saw him first, leaning in the saddle like a man too used to leaving and too proud to stay. His coat flapped in the wind, his hat pulled low, but she recognized him. The man who'd sold her for whiskey and a horse that didn't last the week. He reined in at the edge of Wade's land like it still belonged to him. "Well, hell," he drawled, spitting into the dirt. "Look what I left behind." Wade stepped out of the barn, hammer still in hand. The drifter grinned. "She tell you who she is?" "She told me enough," Wade said. "She tell you she begged me? Cried for me? Thought a man like me could save her." The drifter swung down from his horse. "You bought what I threw away." The widow stepped out from the cabin, voice calm, eyes full of winter. "I wasn't yours to sell." The drifter turned. "Sweetheart, you were whatever I said you were." He moved toward her. Wade moved faster. The fight wasn't cinematic. It was ugly. Real. A knife glinting. A blow to the ribs. Blood in the snow. Wade hit the ground once hard, but got back up with a fury the land seemed to remember. He took the drifter down in a slow, punishing silence. When it was done, the drifter crawled away, not looking back. She knelt beside Wade where he'd fallen near the post where she had once been tied. Blood seeped through his shirt. "I'll get the doc," she whispered. "No," he said, breath shallow. "Just hold still." So she did. She held him through the pain, through the night, through the weight of all the things neither of them knew how to name. The fire burned low, casting long shadows behind them. By morning, he was pale but breathing. She brewed coffee with shaking hands. The girls brought him water in chip mugs. They tended to him not like a stranger, but like something precious. When he finally sat up, the cabin smelled of stew and pine. He looked at her, then at the girls. She met his eyes without fear. "You gave us more than a roof," she said. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The next day, she planted seeds in the thawing yard. The earth was hard, stubborn. But she dug anyway, fingers caked in dirt, dress hem wet with morning dew. She didn't ask for help. But when she turned, he was there beside her, kneeling. Silent. Their hands touched in the soil. She didn't pull away.